Hello, and welcome to Morph Minutes, presented by Studio and Financial. Studio and Financial exists to help you change the sound of your money through financial education and coaching. I am your host, Katrina Pitts, instructor and financial coach. Today's episode is the first in a four-part series on decision making. And this actually came about as a discussion, or from a discussion that I had with a client probably about a month or so ago. And we were discussing major purchases and how we were thinking through whether or not it was a quality purchase or valuable purchase, and sort of what some of the questions that we should consider before making those particular purchases versus see thing, buy thing, or see thing, click the purchase button when we're doing things online. So, four-part series. Today is going to start with major purchases, but I kind of want to give a little bit of a roadmap as to where we're going. We're going to talk about, again, like I said, what is an actual major purchase? How are we paying for this? What's the timeline? What are alternatives? And so hopefully over the next 4 weeks that we go over this topic, we'll have a few more things in our tool belt to help us be educated consumers, and we make good decisions out there in the purchasing world, especially when we're going in the Christmas holidays and we know a lot of purchases will be made. So here we are. We're going to start with major purchases. And what is a major purchase? Do we define major purchases by dollar amount? Do we define them by emergencies that happen and that obviously catch us by surprise because they're an emergency? Do we describe major purchases as something that we need more immediately? Not necessarily an emergency, but we have a shorter timeline with which to make the decision, find alternatives, or make the purchase in order to put us on the pathway to reaching our goals. So what do we mean as a major purchase? For purposes of this series, I'm going to use the dollar amount 200. And the reason for that is I read there was a quote from, or not really a quote, but a statistic from the Fed put out earlier this year that said I think it was 67% of households could not cover a $400 expense by either using cash or cash equivalents, so cash or a credit card. And I think the number was 16%, and I'll double check this, but 16% could not even cover it at all, no matter how they were paying for it. So $400 is challenging for 67% of the people. I just dropped the number to maybe cover a few more percentage of the population in households to be able to take care of those expenses, hence the $200. Now, for some people, $200 is not a big deal, and for others, it's a massive deal. It doesn't matter if it's groceries or electric bill or whatever, $200 is still a lot of money. But for purposes of this conversation, we're going to use $200. If you want to adjust that for yourself, fine. But I just want to make sure that the thought process is still the same, no matter what the amount is. So a couple things to think about. What do you consider a major purchase? Like I said, is it defined by a dollar amount? Is it defined by emergencies? Is it defined by a need to acquire it immediately? Is there a timing aspect of this that we need to be aware of? So we need to do this in the next 30 days, or we need to do this in the next 3 months. And so we need to plan for that or budget for that or whatever it is. But it's still large enough of a price tag that we need to sort of game plan and figure out what makes sense. Secondly, how do you decide when and how you will make that major purchase? So the when, maybe it's already, the when is set for you because there's a deadline attached to it that you have to do this by X date. Or maybe you can, make some arrangements. You're not locked into a particular deadline or timeline. If it's maintenance related, it could be, you're talking to your mechanic. Can this wait another 2 or 3 months, or do I have to do this immediately? You may be able to sort of, again, plan for that and make some adjustments accordingly. Third is, what's the primary challenge that you are faced with a major purchase? And it could be the obvious. You just don't have the money for it, which is a major, major obstacle. If I have this expense, I just don't have the money for it. So then what do I do? Or it could be a major challenge is there's no alternatives. We'll talk about that later in a couple of weeks, but are there any alternatives? Are there any short-term solutions? Are there any local solutions for this? Because you may be dealing with something that is out of state, especially if you are not a landowner, but a property owner or property manager for a home that you had in a different state. And so now you have other things that you need to deal with because of that property needs maintenance, or that your renters are moving out. And so you have to deal with that major purchase, and you're not in that state anymore. You have moved and relocated, which is why you're renting it out. So it could be proximity. It could be, the funds are not available, the resource not available. It could be that there's no other solution to this. This is a single option. We're locked into it. And so that could really be a major, major obstacle or a decision-making point that we have to figure out how to work around it, how to work with it, and what makes the best sense. A couple things to think about in addition to that are needs and wants. So when we're making this purchase, and I was talking this about with my client, is it's not always no purchase. Let me say this differently. Not all purchases are the same. Every $5 purchase is not like every $5 purchase, or every $5,000 purchase, not like every $5,000 purchase. And so they hit a little bit differently. They serve different purposes, and we all know that. But just for the sake of argument, stating it for this very reason is this connected to a need or want? Is this purchase connected to something that I need? And by need, really those four categories of our budget that are really essential. So our food, transportation, utilities, um, uh, uh, housing, thank you. Food, utilities, transportation, housing, those things that we need a roof over our head. We need to keep the lights on. We need to be able to get back and forth to work, to the grocery store, to pick up kids from school. And we also need to be able to have food in the house, feed the people that we are responsible for, even if it's just ourselves, be able to take care of those basic needs. So is this major purchase for that? Meaning I need the car repair done so that I can get back and forth to and from work, or we're putting a deposit down on utilities. So we need to have the money for that because we're either changing service providers or we are changing locations and it requires a deposit for utilities, or you deposit for the rent because of administration fees or administrative fees that go along with changing locations. Doesn't really matter. But if there are things that are involved in that and it is in the furtherance of a need in our life, then it's a necessary purchase, and we just need to make sure how to figure out how to deal with it. Or is it a want, which is totally legitimate also? It's a want. I want to go travel. I want to go take this education class because it's certification for my job and furthering of that. If it's a complete want or a goal or what have you, we'll talk about that here in a second, then that's also something to consider and something to plan for, something to know it's coming. We know what the amount is. How do we make the best use of our time and the resources connected to it? So is this expense for a need or a want? If it's a need, is it part of these four categories? Our housing, our food, our utilities, and our transportation? And if it's a want, does this impact also short or long-term goals? I forgot that part. Short-term and long-term goals. So this is part of our wants, and we have maybe goals for the next 3 months, goals for the next 6 months, goals for the next 30 days, whatever it is. Is this major purchase going to impact those? And if not, it's in furtherance of something else, and we'll get to goals here in a second, then fine. If it is, will impact it, what's our plan? How are we going to minimize and reduce that impact as much as we possibly can? So again, just quickly recap. So what do we consider major purchase? Is it by dollar amount? Is it by emergency? Is it by the need to acquire it immediately or within the next 15 to 30 days? We have a shorter timeline. How do you decide when and how? How will you make this purchase? Cash, credit, opening a personal loan, or how are we going to do this? That makes the most sense for our budgets and make the most sense for our resources. And then what's the primary challenge? Are we faced with a fixed deadline? Are we proximity? We're on location. The issue is in a different state. The issue is in a different community. The issue is fill in the blank. Is there a different service provider? Is there only one service provider? And so there's no alternatives. There's no other options for this. Is the quality or the longevity of this in question? Meaning if we get this fixed for my car, what's the actual approximate, that we can never say specifically or definitively, what's the approximate time frame that this fix is going to work? Is this a short-term thing, or is this going to fix it for a long period of time, meaning I don't have to concern myself with this particular maintenance job again in the near future? And what are the actual funds available? Do I have it? How am I going to use it? We said that earlier. Needs versus want. So is this purchase in the furtherance of a need? Is this purchase in furtherance of a want? How does it impact our goals, short term, long term? the final thing is the goal. Is this expense tied to a specific goal? And I had to think about this a little bit differently. In my maybe because just from as a practitioner, my mind immediately went to, well, is it stopping us from obtaining, from reaching those goals? Is it stopping us from having success in accomplishing those things? And then I had to think about, well, maybe our goal is this money is actually in to achieve that goal. This is a good thing. It may have a high price, but it's a good thing. So yes, if this expense is tied to a specific goal, one, what goal is it? And two, how will this expense help achieve that? And so I went in a couple different directions. So my categories were housing, education, travel, and transportation. And you all can have different ones. That's fine. But these are ones that sprung to mind as I was sort of making notes, preparing for this podcast. So for housing, if we're moving, we're relocating to a better location because we've gotten a job, in a different part of the city. We've got a job in a different state. And so we have moving expenses going along with it. It's an upgrade in housing, not that we have increased our expenses once we have increased our income, because we do want to be mindful of that. But if you get to live in a better place that's safer, that's more convenient, that is better for your personal life and your family's life, then by all means, please, 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 please spend the money on quality housing. And so this is a good thing. You've been wanting to move out, or maybe you've been living with roommates and living at home and you've wanted to establish some level of independence when it comes to housing. And so this is also a good thing. You're beginning to be more self-sufficient. You're beginning to be more reliant upon yourself. All very, very good things. So moving expenses, this is in furtherance of a goal. It's expensive and costly, but it's in furtherance of a goal of moving into a different place that's your own. Education. There's a class you've been wanting to take. I think we mentioned this earlier. A class or a certification or a program that you've been wanting to take because it's going to help you with furthering in your career, or because it's of interest to you. It could be a class you want to take at the local grocery store in cake baking or in cake decorating or jewelry making because you have a side hustle as a jewelry maker. So all these things that are, I want to improve my business, or I want to improve my education, or I want to extend my hobby and learn more about it. Those costs, while they may be expensive, are in the furtherance of that goal. So being mindful of those things. The second one, or the third one, travel. We want to go somewhere. There's plane tickets, there's bus tickets, there's, activities when you get there, car rental, food, all these different arrangements and logistics that you have to concern yourself with and be mindful of. Passport, if you're taking an international trip. So again, I had a goal of going to X country, and spending 6 days there. So part of the things that I needed to do, or what you need to consider, is what does it cost? What's the housing? Do I have a passport? Is my passport expired? Do I need a new one? All of those things are expensive, but they're in furtherance of a goal that you set out at the beginning of the year or middle of the year for the next 12 months, whatever the calendaring is. The other one is transportation. So you've gotten yourself a better car, or you have fixed whatever car that you have. So insurance, down payment, maintenance, it's a major purchase, but it was a goal. I needed to fix XYZ, or I wanted to purchase, my car's 25 years old and I wanted to upgrade and get something a little more current, a little more recent. And so that required a down payment. Insurance was going to be a little different, so taking care of that as well. So all of these things to come into consideration. And there's no, we don't have to go through the checklist of all the questions every single time, but just being mindful of those as we are making those purchases, and that it makes sense for our financial situation that we have, that we're having to work with. So again, what do we consider a major purchase? Is it dollar amount? 200, 500, 50, 1,000, whatever. Is it emergency? As in, I need this immediately. I need this now. There's no delaying this. I have to have this. Do I have to acquire this immediately? Especially if you're looking for education or certificates. They have a start date, they have an end date. So there's an application deadline. So all these things you have to consider. It's not immediate, but there is a defined deadline to it. And it's not an emergency. There's just a deadline to it. How do you decide when and how you're going to pay for it? Is this going to be paid by cash? Is it going to be paid by credit? How we saved for it? If it's paid by credit, how are we going to pay this back? all of those questions to think through and to have an answer for. What are some challenges that we have to overcome with those things? We said it earlier: proximity, amount, timing, alternatives that may not exist or alternatives we not know about, and then needs or wants. Is this purchase in the furtherance of a need? Is this purchase in furtherance of a want? Is this purchase in furtherance of a short or long-term goal that we have for ourselves? Housing or education or travel, or we're writing a book and so we need some editor for it, or whatever it is. It's different for every situation. And then if not, have I determined why this purchase is important and necessary? If it's not for a need, it's not for a want, or I guess it really would be a want, and it's not for a goal, then do I know why this is necessary and why? And am I comfortable with paying this particular amount? And if the answer is yes, and we keep it moving. So it could be entertainment. It could be unaccounted for expenses, job related for the kids. If there's soccer practice, there's baseball, there's basketball. And so we have to get these different, sporting goods or whatever. Again, you fill in the blank for your particular household and situation. But just a couple of things to think about. So part one, major purchases. We've summarized this as, again, amount, timing, emergency, needs, wants, goals, obstacles, all things to consider. We do not have to consider all the things, but they are all things that are available for us to consider. That's going to be the end of this session today. Again, my name is Katrina Pitts. I'm the lead instructor and financial coach here at Studio in Financial. And again, we exist to help you change the sound of your money through financial education and coaching. We will do part 2 here next week, and we look forward to having you back with us. Have a great day.